Children playing in a park are startled when a fox appears, but her actions spark a moment so unforgettable it has everyone talking. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. At Willow Creek Park, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground equipment. Lucas sat alone on a wooden bench, his thin fingers gripping a well-worn copy of the Wild Animals Guide. The 10-year-old boy pushed his glasses up his nose, stealing quick glances at the other children playing nearby. Every few minutes, his eyes would dart from his book to the swings and slides, where kids his age laughed and chased each other. Lucas had moved to Willow Creek just 2 weeks ago. The playground had become his daily retreat after school, though he never ventured beyond the safety of his bench. His mother encouraged him to join the other children, but the thought made his stomach twist into knots. Instead, he buried himself in his book, learning about forest creatures and their habitats. It felt safer than risking rejection from potential new friends. 20 feet away, Emma knelt in the sandbox, her dark curly hair falling forward as she concentrated on her artwork. Her fingers moved deliberately through the sand, creating intricate patterns and shapes. Unlike the other children who built castles or dug holes, Emma saw the sandbox as her canvas. Today, she was drawing the old oak tree that stood at the park's edge, its branches spreading across her sandy canvas like fingers reaching for the sky. Emma noticed everything about the park: the way leaves danced in the breeze, how shadows shifted throughout the afternoon, and especially the quiet boy who always sat alone with his book. She had seen him there every day this week, never speaking to anyone. While other kids might have ignored him, Emma found herself curious about what he was reading that could be more interesting than playing with others. Wiping sand from her hands onto her overalls, Emma stood up. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if approaching him might scare him away. But before she could take a step toward Lucas, a blur of movement caught her attention. Sophie burst onto the scene, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she ran toward the monkey bars. Her energy seemed boundless as she jumped and climbed, her laughter echoing across the playground. The red rubber ball she had been playing with slipped from her grasp, rolling away unnoticed as she continued her enthusiastic play. The ball traveled across the uneven ground, picking up speed as it headed toward a dense cluster of bushes at the park's edge. Lucas tracked its movement from behind his book, while Emma paused her approach to watch its journey. Sophie remained oblivious, now hanging upside down from the monkey bars, her face flushed with excitement. As the ball disappeared into the bushes, a rustle of leaves suggested it hadn't stopped moving. Lucas lowered his book slightly, curiosity temporarily overwhelming his shyness. Emma took a few steps closer to the bushes, her artist's eye catching a flash of movement that seemed different from a simple rolling ball. The park continued its usual afternoon activities around them. Parents chatting on benches, younger children building sandcastles, and the creaking of swing chains. But in that moment, 3 different lives were about to intersect in an unexpected way. Lucas, the shy newcomer with his nose in a book. Emma, the observant artist who noticed everything. And Sophie, the energetic spirit who had accidentally set something in motion. The approaching encounter with Finn remained hidden in the bushes, but the stage was set. Lucas's knowledge of wild animals, Emma's attention to detail, and Sophie's boundless enthusiasm would soon combine to create something extraordinary. For now, there were just 3 kids in a park, unaware that their ordinary afternoon was about to become anything but typical. Ow! The bushes rustled more intensely now, drawing attention from nearby park visitors. A pointed snout emerged first, followed by bright, intelligent eyes and distinctive reddish-orange fur. Finn, a young fox with unusually bold behavior, gripped the red ball gently between his teeth. Rather than retreating with his find, he stayed at the edge of the bushes, pawing at the ball with obvious curiosity. Lucas's book dropped to his lap, his eyes widening behind his glasses. His mind raced through everything he'd just read about red foxes. Their usual fear of humans, their solitary nature, their hunting patterns. But nothing in his book described anything like this. Finn rolled the ball back and forth with his front paws, appearing more like a playful dog than a wild fox. Emma stood frozen, her hands itching for her sketchbook. The fox's movements were fluid and graceful, each motion telling a story she desperately wanted to capture. The afternoon light caught Finn's fur, creating the kind of natural beauty she always tried to recreate in her art. She took one careful step forward, then another, moving slowly to avoid startling the unusual visitor. Sophie, still hanging from the monkey bars, finally noticed the unusual silence that had fallen over her section of the playground. She twisted around and dropped to her feet, her eyes scanning for her missing ball. When she spotted it, and more importantly, who had it, she let out an excited squeal that broke the quiet tension. Look everyone, a fox is playing with my ball." Sophie's voice carried across the playground, causing several parents to snap to attention. Her enthusiasm knew no bounds as she bounced on her toes, pointing toward Finn. Other children began abandoning their activities, drawn by Sophie's excitement. Parents reacted quickly, some calling their children back, others standing up for a better view. Sophie's mother, Mrs. Chun, moved swiftly toward her daughter, her face a mixture of concern and amazement. She reached for Sophie's hand but stopped short when she saw something unusual in the fox's behavior. Finn showed no signs of fear or aggression. Instead, he continued his playful investigation of the ball, occasionally glancing up at his growing audience with what appeared to be genuine interest. His tail swayed gently, and his body language remained relaxed, signs that Mrs. Chun, a veterinary assistant, recognized as non-threatening. Other parents began to relax as well, following Mrs. Chen's lead. They maintained their distance, but allowed their children to watch the unexpected show. Finn had moved fully out of the bushes now, the red ball still his focus of attention. He batted it with his paw, chased it for a few steps, then repeated the process, seeming to enjoy both the game and his audience. The initial tension in the air gradually transformed into something else, a shared sense of wonder. Parents pulled out phones to record the unusual scene, while children whispered excitedly to each other. Even the most cautious adults couldn't help but smile at the sight of a wild fox playing like a puppy in the middle of their neighborhood park. Mrs. Chen's professional experience helped her recognize that this was highly unusual behavior for a wild fox. She kept Sophie close, but couldn't help sharing her daughter's fascination. "Stay calm, everyone," she called out softly. "Let's not frighten him. This is extraordinary." The afternoon light began to soften, casting long shadows across the playground, but nobody moved to leave. The usual end-of-day rush to head home for dinner was temporarily forgotten. Something magical was happening in their ordinary park, and no one wanted to break the spell. Lucas, Emma, and Sophie found themselves standing closer together now, drawn by their shared amazement at Finn's appearance. None of them knew yet that this was just the beginning of an adventure that would change their lives and their community. For now, they watched, in wonder as a wild creature chose to share their playground, breaking down barriers between the natural world and their own in ways they never expected. The initial shock of Finn's appearance gave way to something more interactive. Lucas, who had spent countless hours reading about wildlife, gathered his courage and slowly rose from his bench. His book about wild animals lay forgotten as he experienced something far more remarkable than any printed page could offer. "If we stay calm and move slowly," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we might be able to play with him." For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, he didn't feel like an outsider. His knowledge gave him confidence, and the other children listened intently as he shared what he knew about fox behavior. Emma and Sophie nodded, following Lucas's lead. The red ball lay a few feet from Finn, who watched them with alert but friendly eyes. Lucas took a deep breath and moved forward carefully, reaching for the ball. Finn's ears perked up, but he showed no signs of fear or aggression. With trembling hands, Lucas picked up the ball. "Try rolling it gently," Emma suggested, her artist's eye noting how Finn's muscles tensed in anticipation. Lucas nodded and did just that, sending the ball in a slow arc toward the fox. The playground fell silent as everyone watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Finn's response exceeded all expectations. He pounced on the ball with playful energy, nudging it with his nose before picking it up in his mouth. To everyone's amazement, he trotted back toward the children and dropped the ball at Lucas's feet, backing up a few steps as if waiting for another throw. Sophie could barely contain her excitement, but she remembered Lucas's advice about staying calm. "It's like he's played fetch before," she whispered excitedly. "Can I try next?" Lucas handed her the ball, and she took her turn rolling it toward their new friend. The game continued, with each child taking turns. Finn seemed to understand the rules perfectly, always returning the ball to whoever had thrown it. Other children watched from a distance, but this special moment belonged to the original trio. Their different personalities complemented each other perfectly. Lucas's knowledge, Emma's careful observation, and Sophie's infectious enthusiasm created a balanced dynamic. Emma paused between turns to pull out her sketchbook, her fingers flying across the page as she captured quick sketches of Finn in motion. She drew his playful poses, the way his tail curved when he ran, and the gentle way he handled the ball. These weren't just drawings. They were recording a miracle. The game evolved naturally, with Finn showing remarkable intelligence. He seemed to understand when they called his name, a name that Sophie had suggested, and everyone immediately accepted as perfect. He responded to their voices, their laughter, and even their gestures, displaying a level of interaction that amazed even Mrs. Chun, who continued to watch with professional interest. Lucas found himself laughing more than he had in weeks. His usual self-consciousness disappeared as he focused on playing with Finn and chatting with his new friends. Emma's quiet artistry and Sophie's boundless energy no longer seemed intimidating. Instead, they felt like the perfect companions for this extraordinary afternoon. Parents began taking photos and videos, but maintained their distance, allowing the children's natural connection with Finn to flourish. The usual playground dynamics had shifted entirely. Children who normally stuck to their usual groups watched in fascination as the unlikely trio played with their wild visitor. As the game continued, something deeper than just play was developing. The children were learning about trust, patience, and the unexpected ways friendship could form. They were discovering that sometimes the most magical connections happened when you least expected them, and that, being different, whether you were a shy boy, a quiet artist, a bouncy extrovert, or even a wild fox, didn't matter when hearts connected. As the afternoon progressed, the children's game with Finn evolved into something more organized. Sophie, her natural leadership emerging, suggested they create a special routine. "Let's make Finn the star of his own show," she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "We can give him different signals and see if he understands them." Lucas, growing more confident by the minute, suggested using different pitches when calling Finn's name. His knowledge of animal behavior proved valuable as he explained how various animals respond to different tones. Emma contributed by drawing simple pictures in the dirt, marking spots where they could stand to create a sort of impromptu obstacle course. The new game took shape quickly. When they called Finn in a high, cheerful voice, he would run to catch the ball. A lower-pitched call would signal him to bring it back. The fox picked up on these cues with remarkable speed, demonstrating an intelligence that amazed everyone watching. Mrs. Chin's initial anxiety had completely melted away. She found herself moving closer to the action, her professional curiosity overtaking her protective instincts. Other parents followed her lead, forming a loose circle around the playing area. Their phones remained out, but now they were less focused on documenting potential danger and more on capturing the pure joy unfolding before them. "It's extraordinary," Mrs. Chun said to another parent, her voice filled with wonder. "In all my years working with animals, I've never seen anything quite like this." She began sharing her knowledge about fox behavior with the other adults, helping them understand just how unique this interaction was. The playground, usually segregated by age groups and familiar friendship circles, had transformed into a unified space. Younger children sat cross-legged on the ground, watching in awe as Finn performed his newfound tricks. Older kids offered suggestions for new games, though they respectfully maintained their distance to avoid overwhelming the fox. Emma's artistic direction added an unexpected element to their games. She used her drawings in the dirt to create stations where Finn could stop, marking them with simple symbols. To everyone's amazement, Finn seemed to understand this visual guidance, pausing at each marked spot before moving to the next. Lucas, who had started the day alone with his book, now found himself explaining animal behavior to an attentive audience. His voice grew stronger with each explanation, his previous shyness forgotten in the excitement of sharing his knowledge. Foxes are actually related to dogs, he explained to the gathered children. That's why Finn can learn games so quickly. The afternoon air filled with applause and cheers each time Finn completed a circuit of their makeshift course. The fox appeared to enjoy the attention, his tail held high and his movements becoming more animated with each round. He would occasionally pause to look at his audience, as if making sure everyone was watching his performance. Parents who had planned to leave for dinner made phone calls to adjust their schedules. No one wanted to be the first to break up this magical gathering. The usual part dynamics had been completely upended, replaced by something far more special. Strangers who normally exchanged nothing more than polite nods found themselves in animated conversations about wildlife and community. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, creating a stunning backdrop for their continued play. The changing light seemed to energize rather than diminish the excitement. Someone suggested bringing flashlights from their cars to extend the gathering, but before that became necessary, something even more remarkable caught everyone's attention. The change in Finn's behavior was subtle at first. During one of his ball returns, he suddenly froze, his ears perking forward and his nose twitching rapidly. The playful atmosphere shifted as the fox's wild instincts visibly awakened. His entire body language transformed from playful companion to alert wild animal. Lucas, drawing from his extensive reading about wildlife, recognized this behavior immediately. He's sensing something, he whispered, careful not to break Finn's concentration. Wild animals do this when they detect other creatures nearby. The other children watched in fascination as Finn's attention remained fixed on the forest edge beyond the playground. Emma, always observant, noticed details others might have missed. Look at his tail, she pointed out quietly. It's not scared stiff. It's more like he's recognizing something familiar. She quickly opened her sketchbook, capturing Finn's alert posture and the intensity in his eyes. The wooded area that bordered Willow Creek Park had always been there, a green boundary between the playground and the wider world. During normal days, children rarely paid it much attention. But now, with Finn's behavior drawing everyone's focus, the forest seemed to hold mysterious possibilities. Sophie, typically the first to jump into any situation, showed unexpected restraint. Should we see what he's looking at? She asked, her voice unusually quiet. Her mother, Mrs. Chun, stepped closer, torn between natural caution and genuine curiosity about Finn's behavior. Lucas's mind raced through everything he knew about fox behavior. In the wild, foxes often have specific paths they follow, he shared with the group, his voice gaining confidence. They use these to move between different parts of their territory. His knowledge, combined with the day's extraordinary events, gave him the courage to make a suggestion. Maybe Finn wants to show us something? The adults exchanged uncertain glances. The line between responsible supervision and allowing children to experience something potentially magical seemed increasingly blurry. Mrs. Chun, with her professional background, took the lead. If we stay together and don't go too far into the woods, she began, her words carrying both permission and caution. Finn looked back at the group, then toward the forest again, his behavior reminiscent of a dog wanting its owners to follow. The sun, now lower in the sky, cast long shadows through the trees, creating an atmosphere of mystery and anticipation. Emma quickly gathered her art supplies, determined to document whatever might happen next. Sophie bounced with barely contained excitement, while Lucas found himself unconsciously gripping his book tighter, as if it might help him understand what was about to unfold. Other parents and children began moving closer, drawn by the building sense that something significant was about to happen. The familiar playground equipment stood forgotten behind them as everyone's attention focused on the unexpected adventure developing before them. Finn took a few steps toward the forest, then stopped and looked back, clearly waiting for his new friends to follow. The ball lay forgotten on the ground as a new chapter in their extraordinary afternoon began to unfold. The forest entrance, usually just a background element of their park, now seemed to hold endless possibilities. The line between the manufactured safety of the playground and the wild unknown of the forest had never seemed so thin. As the group prepared to follow Finn, each person felt the weight of the moment. They were about to step beyond the ordinary boundaries of their daily lives into something unexpected and potentially magical. The group followed Finn into the forest, where the manicured lawn of the playground gradually gave way to natural undergrowth. The fox moved with purpose, occasionally pausing to ensure his human companions kept pace. The late afternoon light filtered through the canopy, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. Their destination revealed itself gradually, a natural clearing about 50 yards into the woods. As they entered the space, collective gasps of wonder echoed through the group. The clearing wasn't just any forest opening. It was nature's perfect amphitheater. Wildflowers dotted the edges, and a fallen log created a natural bench along one side. But it was the clearing's other inhabitants that made the scene truly extraordinary. 2 rabbits sat near a patch of clover, their ears twitching but showing no fear. A family of cardinals perched in the lower branches of a nearby tree, their red feathers bright against the green leaves. A young deer stood partially hidden behind a tree, watching the proceedings with curious eyes. "It's like a secret animal meeting place," Sophie whispered, her usual boundless energy temporarily subdued by awe. The natural light in the clearing seemed different somehow, almost magical, as if they had stepped into a scene from a storybook. Lucas couldn't contain his amazement. Everything he had read about natural animal behavior suggested this scene shouldn't be possible. Different species, especially prey animals, didn't typically gather this way. Yet here they were, coexisting peacefully in this hidden sanctuary. Emma's fingers moved rapidly across her sketchbook pages, trying to capture every detail of the unprecedented scene. She drew quick sketches of the rabbit's alert poses, the bird's delicate movements, and the deer's gentle eyes. The clearing's natural light created perfect conditions for capturing the scene's essence. Sophie, unable to contain herself any longer, attempted to communicate with the animals. She made soft chirping sounds at the birds, who surprisingly responded with their own calls. Her face lit up with delight at this unexpected conversation. The rabbit's ears twitched in response to her sounds, but they showed no sign of fleeing. Mrs. Chen watched in professional amazement. "This defies everything we know about wild animal behavior," she whispered to the other parents. "It's as if Finn has created some sort of neutral territory here." Her veterinary training couldn't explain what she was witnessing. The children naturally arranged themselves in a semicircle, with Finn at the center. The fox seemed perfectly at home, lying down casually as if hosting a gathering of old friends. The scene created a striking tableau. Human children and wild animals sharing space in perfect harmony. Other forest creatures gradually revealed themselves. A family of squirrels appeared on nearby branches, and a groundhog peeked out from behind a stump. Each new arrival added to the clearing's magical atmosphere. The normal barriers between human and wild animal seemed to have temporarily dissolved. Lucas found himself sharing facts about each animal that appeared, but for once, book knowledge seemed less important than the direct experience. The other children listened, but their attention remained fixed on the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. Theory had given way to something far more meaningful: direct connection with the natural world. Emma continued documenting everything, her artistic skills capturing not just the physical scene, but also its emotional resonance. Her drawings would later serve as proof of this incredible encounter, though no simple sketches could fully capture the magic of the moment. The clearing became a space where the ordinary rules of nature seemed suspended, where the usual boundaries between human and wild dissolved into something more profound. As the group settled into this extraordinary moment, they realized they had become part of something larger than themselves. A brief but magical convergence of 2 worlds that rarely met on such peaceful terms. The children naturally formed a circle in the clearing, with Finn settling comfortably in the middle. The usual playground hierarchy disappeared, replaced by a shared sense of wonder that made everyone equal. And Yukas, typically hesitant to speak in groups, found himself opening up about his passion for wildlife. "I've always wanted a pet," Lucas shared, his voice steady for the first time since moving to Willow Creek. "But my mom's allergic to cats and dogs. That's why I read so many books about animals instead." He reached out slowly, and Finn responded by moving closer, though maintaining a respectful distance that reminded everyone he was still wild. Sophie, sitting cross-legged on a patch of soft grass, began sharing stories about her golden retriever at home. "His name is Max, and he plays fetch just like Finn does." Her enthusiasm created a bridge between the domestic and wild worlds they were experiencing. "But Finn is special. He's not like any animal I've ever met." Emma continued sketching as she listened, but now she also contributed to the conversation. "I draw Max sometimes when he visits the park," she mentioned, flipping through her sketchbook to show earlier drawings. "But Finn moves differently. He's more graceful." Her artistic observations added another layer to their understanding of their wild friend. The other children in the group began sharing their own pet stories, creating a tapestry of experiences that highlighted the unique nature of their current situation. Tales of hamsters, parakeets, and goldfish mixed with observations about the wild creatures still gathered around them in the clearing. Mrs. Chun, sitting on the fallen log with other parents, added her professional perspective when appropriate, but mostly let the children's natural conversation flow. She noticed how the typically distinct age groups had dissolved, with older kids listening intently to younger ones' stories, all united by their shared extraordinary experience. Finn remained the focal point, his presence somehow both wild and familiar. He would occasionally get up to stretch or change position, but always return to the circle, as if understanding his role in this unusual gathering. The other forest animals maintained their presence at the clearing's edges, creating a unique backdrop to the children's conversation. Lucas found himself sharing facts about red foxes that went beyond textbook knowledge, now informed by his direct experience with Finn. "Books say foxes are usually solitary," he explained, "but Finn seems to understand friendship in a way that's different from what I've read about." The conversation shifted naturally to their own friendships and connections. Children who normally played in separate groups at the playground found common ground in their shared amazement at the day's events. New bonds formed as they shared their experiences and reactions to this magical afternoon. Emma, who usually expressed herself through art rather than words, shared her sketches with the group. Her drawings captured not just the physical appearance of their gathering, but also its emotional resonance. The way everyone leaned in when someone was speaking, how Finn's ears perked up at certain voices, the peaceful coexistence of all the clearing's inhabitants. As the discussion continued, it became clear that something more than just an unusual animal encounter was taking place. The children were learning about acceptance, about how friendship could transcend usual boundaries, and about the unexpected ways connection could happen. Their circle in the clearing became a space where being different, whether you were a shy bookworm, an artistic observer, an energetic extrovert, or even a wild fox, was something to celebrate rather than hide. The lengthening shadows in the clearing signaled that evening was approaching. Parents began checking their phones, realizing they'd spent hours in this enchanted space. The natural world's rhythm started asserting itself as the forest creatures gradually began their evening routines. "We should probably head back," Mrs. Chun suggested gently, noting how the light was fading. Her words carried the weight of adult responsibility, but she delivered them with understanding for the children's reluctance to end this extraordinary experience. Sophie, usually resistant to ending any fun activity, showed surprising maturity. "Maybe we could come back tomorrow," she suggested, looking hopefully at both the adults and Finn. "We could bring snacks to share." The idea immediately caught on with the other children, who began planning future visits with enthusiastic detail. Mrs. Chun, considering the suggestion carefully, offered a structured compromise. "We could make this a regular afternoon meeting," she proposed, "but we'll need to set some ground rules to keep everyone safe." Her veterinary experience helped her balance the children's enthusiasm with practical considerations. Lucas, who had spent the afternoon emerging from his shell, spoke up with newfound confidence. "I can bring my wildlife books," he offered, "and maybe we could learn more about all the animals we've seen today." His suggestion was met with eager nods from the other children, who now saw him as their resident animal expert. Emma held up her sketchbook, now filled with drawings from their afternoon. "I could teach anyone who wants to learn how to draw the animals," she added, her usual shyness tempered by the day's shared experience. Several children immediately expressed interest, creating yet another bridge between them. As the group prepared to leave, Finn began his own farewell routine. The fox stood and stretched, then walked to each child in turn, as if personally saying goodbye. His behavior continued to amaze the adults, who had never seen anything like it in a wild animal. "See you tomorrow, Finn," Sophie called out, unable to contain her optimism about future visits. The fox's ears perked up at his name, and for a moment, he seemed to respond with what looked remarkably like a nod. Then, with graceful movements, he began walking toward the forest's deeper sections. The other woodland creatures had already begun dispersing, each returning to their evening routines. The clearing, which had hosted such an extraordinary gathering, slowly returned to its natural state. Yet something about the space had changed. It now held memories and promises of future adventures. Parents and children gathered their belongings, carefully keeping track of Emma's drawings and Lucas's books. Mrs. Chun organized an impromptu parent meeting to exchange phone numbers and discuss supervision schedules for future visits. The adults recognized that something special had happened, something worth preserving and nurturing. As they walked back toward the playground, the children continued chattering about their plans for tomorrow. The usual playground cliques had dissolved, replaced by new friendships forged through their shared magical experience. Even the most skeptical parents had to admit that something extraordinary had transformed their community. The playground equipment came back into view, looking somehow different now. What had once been the center of their park experience now seemed like just one part of a larger, more magical world. The border between the manufactured play space and the natural world had blurred, creating new possibilities for adventure and connection. The next morning arrived with a sense of anticipation. Lucas woke up early, carefully packing his backpack with field guides and a small notebook. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, he felt genuine excitement about going to the park. He rushed through breakfast, surprising his mother with his unusual urgency to leave the house. Emma spent her morning adding finishing touches to yesterday's sketches, capturing details she remembered after getting home. She'd stayed up late the night before, working on a special drawing of Finn that she planned to frame for their meeting spot. Her parents noticed how she hummed while working, a new confidence evident in her artistic process. Sophie could barely contain herself during her morning routine, repeatedly telling her mother about her plans for their afternoon gathering. Mrs. Chun listened patiently, already coordinating with other parents through a newly created group chat about supervision schedules and safety guidelines for their unusual situation. When the three children finally met at the playground, the atmosphere felt different. The usual equipment, swings, slides, and monkey bars, seemed secondary to the forest's edge where their adventure had unfolded. They waited, watching the tree line for any sign of their fox friend. Minutes turned into hours. Other children joined them, all eager to experience yesterday's magic. But Finn didn't appear. The initial excitement began to fade into concern. Lucas referenced his wildlife books, reminding everyone that foxes are naturally elusive and don't usually maintain regular patterns. Emma set up her sketchbook on a park bench, drawing the scene and capturing the mix of hope and disappointment on her friends' faces. Sophie, typically boundless in her energy, sat quietly on the grass, her eyes fixed on the spot where Finn had first appeared with her ball. As the afternoon progressed, a group of adults approached the children. They wore khaki uniforms with wildlife service badges, carrying clipboards and cameras. The children's hearts sank, fearing bad news about their friend. Mrs. Chin stepped forward to meet them, her veterinary credentials helping bridge the communication. "We've been monitoring this area," one of the wildlife officers explained. "There's been unusual fox activity reported here over the past few weeks." They showed photographs of Finn taken from a distance, along with detailed notes about his behavior patterns. The children listened intently as the officers shared their observations. They learned that Finn had been part of a longer-term study of urban wildlife adaptation. His unusual comfort around humans had caught the researchers' attention weeks before yesterday's remarkable encounter. What makes this fox unique, another officer explained, is his ability to maintain his wild nature while showing unprecedented social behaviors. They shared data about Finn's movements, his territory, and his interactions with other wildlife in the area. Lucas absorbed every detail, comparing the scientific observations with his own experience. Emma sketched the officers as they spoke, capturing their serious expressions and professional demeanor. Sophie asked practical questions about Finn's safety and whether they could continue their friendship with him. The conversation might have dampened the children's spirits entirely, if not for what happened next. A movement at the forest's edge caught everyone's attention. Hearts racing, they turned toward the trees, hoping to see their friend return. The mood in the park shifted from disappointment to electric anticipation as everyone turned toward the forest's edge. Through the undergrowth came a familiar flash of reddish-orange fur. Finn had returned. But this time, something was different. Following close behind him, matching his careful steps, was a smaller fox, a young kit with bright eyes and distinctive markings. The revelation stunned everyone into silence. Finn hadn't just been playing with the children. He'd been evaluating the safety of the area for something far more important, his family. "It's a fox kit," Lucas whispered excitedly, his wildlife knowledge kicking in. Probably about 3 months old. His voice trembled with the significance of what they were witnessing. Adult foxes were typically fiercely protective of their young, keeping them well hidden from humans. This level of trust was unprecedented. Emma's hands moved quickly across her sketchbook, capturing this historic moment. The kid had Finn's same confident bearing, but moved with the playful awkwardness of youth. Its fur was slightly fluffier, its face more rounded, creating an almost perfect miniad. Your version of their friend. Sophie, for once, remained perfectly still, understanding instinctively that any sudden movement might frighten the young fox. Her usual boundless energy channeled into intense observation as she watched the pair approach. Mrs. Chun placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder, sharing this remarkable moment. The wildlife officers quickly but quietly began documenting the scene. This behavior defied everything they knew about fox family dynamics. One officer whispered to Mrs. Chun that this was a groundbreaking moment in urban wildlife study, a wild fox intentionally introducing its offspring to a human community. Finn guided the kit toward the children's familiar circle, maintaining a careful distance but clearly demonstrating trust. The young fox followed its parents' lead, showing curiosity rather than fear. The ball from yesterday's game still lay in the grass, and the kid approached it cautiously, mimicking Finn's playful behavior from the day before. Lucas, Emma, and Sophie exchanged glances, understanding the profound responsibility they now shared. This wasn't just about making friends with a wild animal anymore. They had become part of something larger, a bridge between the human and natural worlds that defied conventional boundaries. The other children and parents watched in amazement as the kid began exploring the playground area, always staying close to Finn. The adult fox's behavior now made perfect sense. The games, the social interaction, the careful observation of the human community, it had all been preparation for this moment of trust and connection. Mrs. Chun, drawing from her veterinary experience, spoke softly to the group. This is more than just unusual behavior. This is evolution in action. We're witnessing how wildlife can adapt and create new kinds of relationships with human communities. Her words carried the weight of scientific understanding while acknowledging the magic of the moment. As the sun began to set on this second extraordinary day, the group realized that their magical encounter had transformed into something even more meaningful, a responsibility to protect and nurture this unique relationship. The playground at Willow Creek Park had become more than just a recreation space. It was now a proving ground for a new kind of coexistence between humans and wildlife. The story of Finn and his kit would eventually spread beyond Willow Creek, challenging conventional wisdom about wildlife behavior and human-animal relationships. But for Lucas, Emma, and Sophie, it would always be personal. A reminder that the most powerful magic lies in trust, friendship, and the courage to bridge divisions, whether between species or between people. As Finn and his kit prepared to return to the forest, the children understood that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Their ordinary playground had become the setting for an extraordinary example of how nature and humanity could write new stories together, one playful moment at a time.